I'm very excited to chat with my guest today. Lisa VanOstrand has devoted her professional life to the study of energetic healing. Lisa is currently the president and on the board of directors at the Brennan Healing School. She's also a doctor of Medical Qigong and an acupuncturist in the state of Florida. To add to that CV, which is very impressive to me, she's also a core energetics therapist who studied core energetics with John Parakas, MD, who was the founder. Dr. Parakas was also a student of Willem Reich. She's a Clairvision Practitioner, which I understand to be a meditation discipline. Graduate of the Society of Souls, which is something that we share in common. And she's also been a student of the Diamond Approach, and I can't say enough about that work. Lisa, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure.
Was really looking forward to this. And I want to jump right in and talk about what this thing that we call energetic healing is, because I know a lot of people have heard about it, but maybe they don't know some of the differences. So with all this level of study, what is energetic healing?
Well, as you know, the physical is just one realm or one aspect of who we are. We have Barbara Brennan actually identified 4 different dimensions that we exist in, and she called this the energetic consciousness system of a human being. Mm-hmm. So there's the physical, and then we have the auric, or the energy field that has different levels that are our personality. Then we have the hara, which is our line of intention that we incarnate into this lifetime with. And then we have our core star dimension, which is the level of the divine and the existence of who we are across all timelines. So when we talk about energetic healing, we're really working to address all of these different levels: the energy field, the hara, the core star, with the idea that working with all of these, of course, affects the physical, because our belief is that the energetic dimension precedes the physical.
So it's as if the things that one holds in their energy field eventually ends up in the physical, and you sort of reverse engineer the process and work from an energetic level, knowing that the precursor to their physical experience of pain or suffering or whatever they're going through has energetic components. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say that that's a very accurate description.
Yeah. So there are a lot of different healing modalities out there, a lot of different healing schools and stuff. What is it about the Barbara Brennan School that makes it different from your perspective? What's the Barbara Brennan School all about?
And so our program, it's a 4-year program, assuming that one would go through all 4 years. And each of these years goes in depth with the energy consciousness of each one of these dimensions that I've already talked about. So we not only do healings that work with your energy consciousness, but we're also doing our own personal work, our own personal self-inquiry to also work with the energy consciousness so that we can really become authentic individuals, our true self, because so much of the time our energy consciousness, whether we're aware of it or not, we're navigating our life through old belief systems or through old wounding. So much of the time we're not really operating in true freedom.
And I'm sure that type of personal work goes a long way in terms of creating better human beings, freer human beings. But I'm thinking about, questions that people might have about hands-on healing and how it works. Barbara's book was called Hands of Light. So we're talking about some form of connection between the healer and the healee, and the healer is in some way connecting with the divine energy, some kind of universal life force, God, if you will, and it's running through their hands and working with the energy field of the recipient. So I'm wondering, how does that work for you?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely are also going to be accessing the universal consciousness. It's what comes in, assuming that our chakras are not blocked, that universal consciousness is coming into us as information. But we're using the specific techniques. For example, we do past life healings. We do lines of light where we would be restructuring. Let's say somebody has an injury or surgery. So we're also combining very specific healing skills along with our awareness of the different levels of the field and the different dimensions to affect change.
So that being a clear vessel is part of the process, but there's more to it than that, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, so that's why we have the 4 years. So for example, in the first year, we're really looking at the first 3 levels of the field, which really of the auric field, which really have to do with how we feel about ourselves, how we think about ourselves, grounding ourselves, making our own physical body very strong.
Right.
And, it's just even talking about energy consciousness. And we mentioned earlier about, the potential for disease or disharmony. And I think one of the things that is very interesting is like when we look, for example, at the second level of the field, those are our feelings about ourselves. And my own personal experience, as well as what Barbara has written in one of her books, is that she believes that people's inability to really deeply love themselves is often at the core of so many disease and illness.
Right.
And so that's why we really have to look at all of these things that are within ourselves, because if we can't recognize them within ourselves, then it's very difficult to heal them in someone else. And so that's just as an example of year 1. And then in year 2, we work with relationships and past lives. And then in year 3, we work with our relationship with the divine. And then in year 4, we work with the level of the hara, which again, this is our intention to be here. And why did we incarnate? And we all have specific reasons that we've chosen to incarnate at this time. And then the core star dimension, we do healings to bring out our gifts and to bring this out into the world that's our own unique expression. So we really do work very deeply at all of these dimensions of the human being, both within ourselves and then also learning how to work with others.
Well, that's an impressive body of work there. So I want to make sure that the audience has a clear understanding of what is creating illness in the body. From this perspective anyway, the premise of healing on an energetic level. If I understand this correctly, and I think I do, if I've got something that we'll call a presenting complaint, a problem with my heart or something like that, the assumption there is that there is an energy blockage that is somewhere, let's presume, in the heart chakra, meaning that either in this life or in a previous life, as you explained before, there may be something that is my body is trying to tell me about my mental, emotional, spiritual state of being, which caused this blockage in that particular chakra or energy center, to use a different language.
Yeah, I mean, I would generally say that that's a true statement. I'm always really reluctant to narrow down disease and illness into something very specific and to something that's really readily understood by the rational mind, because I think that's what we all want to do. Right. We want to know, like, why am I ill? Why did I get this? And sure. And so I think generally speaking, what you said is true. And we also have to understand that in our human mind, that there is also this aspect that we could never really understand 100% why a specific event is happening. And that so underneath that, there is always the level of the mysterious and understanding, God's will or the divine will, whatever each individual, however they like to name the divine. So the reason why I bring that up is because I think it's so important for people who might listen to this and might have an illness or might know someone who has an illness. We don't want to make someone feel bad or that they caused it or that they have a block. So the way I like to just think about it is that it's really an opportunity for some kind of potential lesson. Mm-hmm. There's that. And there's also, too, the idea that we all are going to die. Mm-hmm. And illness is just one way of having that happen. And sometimes people's, their time is just up. But I do believe, with all of that said, that when there is a specific illness, that there is a resonance with that particular part of the body that it manifests. Mm-hmm. And so I'm always looking for that. So I'm always asking myself, when someone comes in with a specific illness, is why is it in the heart mm-hmm. versus the brain? Or why is it in the, uterus versus the heart? So yeah. I do feel that there is somewhat of a resonance, and I've based this on it. Something I'm really incredibly fascinated with, because I've actually, being an acupuncturist and also running a lot of clinics, I've been lucky to be able to supervise so many different cases. Mm-hmm. And I've just found such an incredible correlation between people's experiences and where things have manifested. And often people themselves can tell you that.
Right.
When you ask them, why do you think this happened in this particular organ, or why do you think this is manifesting this way?
Right.
And I'll tell you one other thing that I also think is really interesting about this. I've had many people say this to me, as well as I've had my own personal experience of this. And Barbara talks about this in one of her books, is that Light Emerging, is that we almost always have some kind of warning, barring a mass catastrophe. We usually have some kind of warning that we're out of balance. Mm. And that's something I really have learned to pay attention to myself, because your body will talk to you. And it'll say things like, I've just really got to stop, or this, I've heard people say, well, this job is killing me. Right. It's like, wow, that's really a message that something is really needs to come back into balance here.
Yeah, I totally get that. So you do see the correlations, but you said something that is very interesting to me about being in the unknown. I think you mentioned that this may be part of divine will, and talking about the relationship with the unknown. Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Sure. I guess I just meant that we could never really totally understand why something is happening. I mean, there's our ordinary mind that wants to plan, wants to understand, and then there's the divine mind mm-hmm. that is operating at a higher level that we cannot possibly understand. And so a great example is when you look at a child and you would ask yourself, like, well, why would a young child have this particular disease? So I think that's really a great example of not being able to really understand or fathom the meaning behind it. Mm-hmm. And it really calls into each person's individual belief about what the divine is. And I honor what everyone's belief is. And this is just my own personal belief. Whatever my own personal experiences. I lived in India. I have a long-term meditation background and experience, and just having some of my own experiences of the divine. I do feel that in the same way that we as a human being have feelings and mind and will as part of our functionality, that the same thing exists at the level of the divine. And really all ancient traditions, as you noted in my bio, I'm an acupuncturist. I'm also a long-term student of Taoism, which I love. And Taoism, like everything else, believes that nothing can exist in the physical world without there being a representation of it from heaven. So as above, so below.
Sure.
We are a microcosm of the universe.
Right. And we're still connected to that superconscious strata continually through our existence, whether it be in one lifetime or in many.
Exactly.
Would it be fair to say that you think of energetic healing as a combination of energy and consciousness? And if so, would you call the work that you're teaching at Barbara Brennan psychospiritual in nature?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, Barbara defines these dimensions as energy consciousness. Mm-hmm. So yes, that is absolutely part of our of the whole model, is that we exist as energy consciousness. And then as a part of working with that energy consciousness, we use psychospiritual tools to help work with that. So, for example, listening is actually a psychospiritual skill, and contact and boundaries. Right now with the coronavirus, we're really all having to work on our boundaries and how that, how does that work for each one of us? So, yes, we use those as tools to delve into energy consciousness.
Well, let's talk about some of the tools if you're comfortable, because I really think that as people listen to this, they probably are feeling a call and they think to themselves, I might like to delve into that. I might like to become a Brennan healer. So what would they be signing up for? You gave a broad outline of what's taught over the 4 years that you work with people to become effective healers. What are you teaching? Are you teaching psychic development, expanding awareness?
Our program is divided into different sections. We have healing science skills that relate to each one of the particular aspects of the field that I was speaking about earlier, or the dimensions.
Right.
And then we do teach the spiritual skills, the psychospiritual skills. So we're teaching that as well.
In year one.
In all of the years, we have healing science skills, and we teach them in a variety of different ways. Like sometimes we have skits, sometimes we have people pair into dyads. We have people exploring them through their the homework that they do, through their personal practices that they're doing. So these skills are meant to spiral down. It's not like you go, okay, I'm going to learn about listening and that's it. Right. It's like you have to keep spiraling down and revisiting these, because each time that you do, more material surfaces. Right. So yeah, we have those two components, and then we also teach professional practice and creative arts.
Mm-hmm. So do you think that the work that you're doing in the running of scales, that's how I draw a comparison. I'm a musician, so I think of going back to the fundamentals when you're talking about those spiraling. You have to keep going back to the fundamentals. It opens up something. And what it triggers for me in my musical practice anyway, is that it opens up my creativity, it opens up my sensorium. It's in many ways, in my opinion, a psychic function. I'm being connected once again through going through the process of chopping wood and carrying water, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, Barbara's last book was about the creative process and how it flows down from the highest level through all the fields. And if we're able to have it flow down without any blocks,
right,
then that is true creativity, and it manifests in the physical in a way that is delightful and meaningful to ourselves. So it actually totally is a function of the creative process.
And would you say this is a psychic function, opening up one's sense perceptions to be able to see what's going on in the field, for instance?
Absolutely.
Is it something that you're teaching people to do and to open up their sensorium in whatever ways available?
We have specific exercises that we do as we progress throughout the years. So it happens through specific exercise, through practicing, and also through clearing our energy field and like having all of our chakras open and being aligned. All of these are what create clear information coming through. And Barbara referred to that as a coherency in the field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes complete sense to me. I've always been impressed by the amount of training that you provide to students. As I said to you earlier, my wife is a graduate. But you provide a lot of training to the students regarding their own work, doing their own personal work, which is really kind of an exploration in personal consciousness. What type of personal work do you have your students do while they're in training to avoid things like transference and projection?
Okay. So there's a lot of personal work. So, of course, there's the work that they're doing in class. And I just want to point out that one of the beauties of the work of doing it in class is that you proceed through each of the years with the same group of people. And that's really important because the group somehow kind of ends up modeling your family dynamics. And so it gives you an opportunity for things to come up that are maybe not going to come up if you're just doing one-on-one work, or you're moving to this group and then you're moving to another group. So the consistency of the same group with the work that we provide in classes, through the homework, students are also asked each year to do 18 sessions of their own personal process work to keep deepening. And then, of course, I guess this counts as in-class work, but, all of the healings that we do are designed to just keep bringing things up. And it sounds horrible in a way, but it's wonderful. I mean, it's, sometimes it's our worst fear that we don't want to go places. We defend against maybe wanting to open up some of these places that have been painful, but once we do, the freedom that results from that is just so amazing.
Right, and you can also be that clear vessel. I mean, it's an effective thing, I think, to know when you're in relationship to somebody what your level of transference and what you're projecting onto that person is.
Correct.
Because you can't truly be present with somebody if you're thinking about what you're going to say instead of listening to what they're saying.
Right.
For instance, I mean, that's such a, blatantly obvious observation. But there are also little subtle things. The fact that you might like somebody on first meeting or not like them on first meeting. These are all products of depth psychology, which I'm imagining you study as a result of, being a graduate of or a practitioner of core.
Well, core energetics kind of is more oriented around a childhood development model that we also use at the Barbara Brennan School, that we found it to be really helpful, that during certain stages of childhood development, that certain needs were not met. And as a result of that, the child learns, certain strategies to manage their life, which actually ends up being anti-life. And so we do spend quite a bit of time working with that model, again, to help people uncover their blocks.
Right. But it's really a function of not only expanding consciousness, but also inquiry, as I'm hearing you.
Exactly. And that's one of our skills. It's called witness, asker, experiencer. So that's another one. And, we have I don't know the exact number, but I'm going to say 13 that we're constantly working with in each year and constantly looking at so that we can become that clear vessel. And witness, asking, experiencer is just really about allowing ourselves to be present with what's really here without, any judgment about what we should be doing or any layering that we so often put on ourselves.
Right. And in doing so, wouldn't you call that a healing?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a healing to ourselves.
Right.
Because we're usually our own worst critic.
Amen to that.
And many times we would never treat anyone the way that we treat ourselves.
Yes, and we can go down that rabbit hole probably for a good hour, but we won't. But it seems to me that as a healer in training, you're learning to hold an awful lot of things. You're talking, it's almost like an expanded state of consciousness because you're having to be aware of internal things like projection or transference, possibly being present. At the same time, you're being fully present with your client or as present as you possibly can be. So we're not talking about the simple transmission of life force or energy in order to affect a change, although that's present too, correct?
Right. I would agree with that. It makes it sound really hard.
No, it's fascinating to me because, as you said during the course of the school, I'm hearing that, if I understood you correctly, that there's an observer that's developed where you can start to realize that the people that you're working with are mirroring something for you as a healer in training. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would. I mean, I'm not sure I would exactly say it that way. I guess it would depend on what stage of healership that you're at. Mm-hmm. Certainly I do think, I think there's different ways that you can look at the question that you just asked. Certainly there's the idea of transference, which could be either negative or positive. Mm-hmm. Then there could be the healer's own transference, which we call countertransference. Right. And then it can also just be that this person, because of your particular skills and experience, somehow resonates with your energy such that you are a mirror to them to affirm their what it is that they need affirming for.
Somebody who's perhaps one step ahead on the path.
Exactly.
And tells somebody, don't watch out for that pitfall right there. You might want to. I fell in there myself once.
Exactly.
Right. We're talking about a level of human psychology, and you can't really avoid the concept of consciousness when you talk about psychology from a personal level. And I ask this of all my guests. How do you define consciousness?
Well, I usually always start out and talk that there's two kinds of consciousness. There's our ordinary human consciousness, and then there's divine consciousness. And so for me, I usually always kind of reference it in those two ways because I think that's entirely different kinds of energy, different kinds of attributes around it. And I don't know, that would be my first response. Well, like what kind of consciousness are you talking about? Certainly I feel that consciousness is what creates the world, whether we're talking about consciousness in the mind of the divine or whether it's consciousness in the example of man. Like before I can create anything, I have to think of it first. And so I believe that is true of the divine as well. There's many, sayings around, going back to my background in India about, the world exists in the mind of God, and, these such sayings. So I would put consciousness in that aspect.
So you're able to hold the basic split, the split being consciousness is a byproduct of the brain from a very Western perspective where it's an on-off kind of function. You're either aware of something or you're not. And you can also hold that the notion that consciousness is a sea in which we swim.
Correct.
So you refer to that as the mind of the divine or the mind of God versus the personal consciousness.
Well, the ordinary mind that's just thinking and when you if we were to connect it back to healing and being present and being with an individual, what I really don't want to be doing is being in my ordinary mind. Is I really want to be opening up to this universal consciousness that can inform me exactly what that client needs. And one other thing that comes to my mind as we're speaking is that in another way, consciousness could be thought of as only one of the qualities of the divine. So there's also another saying that the divine exists. Well, the divine is consciousness, existence, and bliss. So that's another thought process. So, and then in our model, as well as the model when we think of ourselves as a human being, that would be divine mind, divine love, and divine will could loosely connect to those categories as well. So that's another way of looking at it.
You're referring to Sat, Chit, and Ananda.
I am.
You are.
I am.
And I am.
Right. Therefore, I am. Right.
Exactly.
I am that I am.
Okay. So far, we've been talking about the psycho-spiritual aspects of healing, and I know you do acupuncture as well. Most people associate energy healing as a form of faith healing, and in that respect, it's the power of the divine which heals the condition. There are plenty of documented cases of spontaneous healing through this modality, so I don't have any doubts. In some traditions, however, when that doesn't happen, it's often blamed on the lack of faith that one has in the divine to perform the healing function. I think there might be some merit to that given what I know about psychoneuroimmunology. The belief in the treatment we know often affects a cure. So that's a psychological component of healing which can't be ignored. I'm very interested in the mechanism of why energy healing works, because I know it does, but not always in the ways that I fully understand. And I know that the best of Western medicine that they have to offer doesn't always do the trick either. There's no blaming or naysaying intended here. I'm just wondering if you know what I'm speaking about and if you have ever wondered yourself.
Well, I mean, definitely. I think it's both.
Right.
I feel that what you said is definitely true. And at the same time, something that's crystallized in the physical, if we're talking about a specific illness,
right.
The reversal of that specific condition may not be able to occur instantaneously, but certainly healing, which we kind of, I think, started this somewhere at the beginning. We didn't completely explore it, but I mean, what is healing?
Mm-hmm.
And that really is something that I've kind of started writing about, because I think it can be a very confusing notion that when people ask me, like, have you healed this condition? Well, it's not about me healing your condition. It's about you healing your condition. This is your path. This is your journey. I'm your witness and your ally and your support, but it's really all about you. And I think people don't often see that. And also then just, again, the deeper question is, what is healing?
Mm-hmm.
And it may not be, just the reversal of a physical disease. It may be like, that this person's heart is now so completely open and so completely vulnerable, and they're so present because whatever this illness has brought them to a place where that, you know, is just stripped everything away that was in the way before, and they're just left to their raw, beautiful, vulnerable self. So, you know, it really begs the whole question, like, what is healing?
Oh, you just answered the next question I was going to ask you, which is, what is healing? Because I found that connection to be healing for me, to be present with all these levels of mind that I do exist on.
Absolutely.
I can't even explain it beyond just simply using the word healing. I am more present. I am more whole. I'm more authentic. So I'm curious to know if most of the people who come to you are looking for that psycho-spiritual opening, or if they come to you with presenting complaints like physical ailments.
I think it's a whole variety of different reasons that people come to the school. Mm-hmm. It's hard for me to say. You know, some might have physical ailments. Some people might feel like they want to do something in their life to make a difference. And by the way, not all of our graduates end up being healers. There's people that are from all walks of life, because it's really about finding, you know, what your unique expression is in the world. So we have all different situations where people are drawn to the school. It's actually really fascinating. At some point, I really want to create a book of different people's experiences of what drew them to the school, because people have such incredible experiences about what drew them to the school. Like I for myself, I had no interest really in becoming a healer. I was in India, and I had been, was on a meditation tour group, and just we were sitting around at a table, and somebody was talking about Barbara Brennan's book, and I just was like, oh, whatever, you know, I didn't even know anything about it. And I was getting ready to come back home, and I was in a bookstore in New Zealand, and they had the book displayed, and I was like, oh, there's that book. And I picked it up, and this bolt of lightning shot through me. And this voice said, this is your destiny. You are a healer. And I mean, I was just like totally blown away. And you would not believe how many people have experiences where they're asking for a sign or something, or they meet someone that they have these experiences that draw them to the school. So it's really fun hearing all of those.
Well, you just answered my next question, which was, how did you get involved in this? I know from my personal experience, I started all of this, I've been meditating since I'm about 15, so I'm a little long in the tooth. It's, a good 40 some odd years now. And I did so because I was very uncomfortable with the notion of not knowing. It made me terribly uncomfortable. And the thing that I wanted most in life, the strongest desire I had, was to be a professional musician, which I ended up doing for quite a long time. But I had no idea of how I was going to get there. And I had read a book that was, I can't even remember the name of the book now, but it introduced the notion of that meditation would help me focus on creating my goals in some kind of mystical way, and also from a very mental, emotional way. I could just focus and direct my consciousness to, be very intentional. So I'm thinking about that line of intention that you were referring to as core star, which is
Hara,
which is a line of intention between what we'll call the divine mind, the Godhead, to you. Can you talk about that as a potential method of healing? And would you say that ultimately is the greatest healing?
Well, I don't think one healing is greater than another, because I think you have to look at what a specific person is in need of at any moment in time. And that healing is the greatest healing, is what that person needs at that moment in time.
Gotcha.
Ahara healing is really useful for really strengthening our intention for what it is that we want to create, whether it could be, in that moment, it could be with our life. It's the connection between the divine and the earth. And so for me, when I really look at one of the structures on the hara is the dantian, that really it's below your navel. It's really got this center that's really connected to our will. And then we have another structure that's above the heart, that's the soul seat, that's really connected to our longing. And so for me, like ahara healing is also about really connecting those aspects of us together. When something's not working, we need our will, we need our longing. So it's really connecting our will, our heart, or our longing, and our mind to kind of all be going in the same direction and to be very centered. Because often, we call it split intentionality, where somebody says something, but then they're really not following through on it.
Right.
So that's really an example of when ahara is misaligned, or so there are definitely instances where ahara healing is very, very called for.
So it's a matter of what is needed in the moment, and my assumption that it's probably the single most powerful healing, quote unquote, is probably pursuant to what I was particularly looking for when I began my own meditation practice.
Right. Also Core Star is a very valid healing that can actually can be a part of any healing, and is also equally important because it's our connection to the divine.
Right.
And so therefore that's something that's always wonderful to upwell and to have it be a part of our remembrance at a cellular level.
Yeah, I agree. And do you think, psychologically speaking, that is one of the motivating factors behind every desire to be healed, whole, redeemed?
To connect back to the divine?
Yes, to feel that sense of connection.
I think whether it's consciously recognized or not, I believe it is the motivating force of evolution. I think it's happening whether we're aware of it or not.
Right.
So when we speak of evolution, that somehow healing is happening through our evolving, then yes, I think I would say that's true.
I think it plays a part. And I'm thinking about the situation that we find ourselves in right at this moment, where people are socially distancing and, we're dealing with the coronavirus. What are your thoughts about the coronavirus from a psycho-spiritual level? Any input?
Yes. I have tended to look at it somewhat from a Chinese medicine perspective. Because I liked looking at it from the idea of the lungs, and the lungs from a Chinese medicine perspective, which is also an energetic language, hold the core qualities of righteousness and integrity. And so I think it's an invitation and clarity. So I think it's an invitation for us to look at where we might have lost those in certain aspects of the world, wherever we might see them, and in our own life, and in our businesses, and our politics, and in everything. How can we restore righteousness, integrity, and clarity? And then also the lungs, through the air that we breathe, is our connection to our ancestry. And so I feel that it's a moment in time for us to just really stop and go, what are we doing for the ancestry? Not just the past, but also for the future. And how can we just stop and consider how we can leave the world in a better place for our ancestry. So these are just some of the things that I've been thinking about. Certainly in terms of energy, it's a very interesting phenomenon, because it shows, we have our own individual field, but then we also have our field interacting with, whatever other fields are going on in the world. And certainly as a global event, this is definitely very, very massive from an energetic perspective.
And pretty much all about relationship.
That too. Yeah.
It really does play a large part. So I imagine that there are lots of Brennan practitioners that are out there that are currently having to do sessions long distance because because of the social distancing practices. Have you ever, do you have any insight as to how long distance healing works?
I do. I mean, I think it's not as mysterious as some people might want to make it into, because we all have had experience. I mean, I can imagine if we had a room of 100 people or whatever, and we took a poll and we said, how many times have you thought of a person and they rang you on the phone? Sure. Or almost everybody universally has had these kind of experiences.
Precognitive, so right.
Exactly. And so that's just an example of knowing that, our energy is affecting things at a distance, and that we exist beyond time and space. And so really it's just a function of, how do you connect with this particular person, and then, doing whatever healing technique it is that you've learned to do on that person, as if they were there physically, knowing that again, we're past and beyond time and space.
Well, that's not an unusual idea for you, because you spend a lot of time doing it. But for some people, of course, it would be a bit of a mystery. And I just wondered if you had any ideas about it. I think the answer might be found in the realm of physics. And speaking of which, it's my understanding that Barbara started out as a physicist. Is that correct?
Correct. And I think one thing that you said, I maybe would want to say something else. As we begin to move to long distance, and I can't quote them what they are off the top of my head, but we actually did a survey and found quite a few scientific studies that talked about energy transmission. I mean, actually, when you pray for someone, so certainly that has been in existence since time immemorial, and in different ways, different, maybe one tradition might not call it prayer, but something like the equivalent of prayer has been done since time immemorial. And so really it's no different than knowing that these things do work, and there actually is a scientific basis. But the hardest thing, of course, as you said, is our mind to believe that it can work. And that's usually always what people are like, oh my God, I can't believe this works. And sometimes I even find myself saying that. So it's our own mind that has to get out of the way.
Well, I ask these questions knowing that there are a lot of people out there that have no idea. And these are questions that emerge, and they're valid questions. They're important questions, Personally, I've been involved in the studies that you mentioned when I was at the Monroe Institute. We were part of the CSCAT studies taking place at University of Virginia, and that is an acronym for the Center for the Study of Complementary and Alternative Therapies at NIH. And they continue funding these studies even today. We don't fully understand the mechanisms behind such things as long-distance healings or how we collapse time and space and consciousness, but it's all part of the very same conversation, in my opinion, because consciousness is rarely in the present moment. Consciousness, from a personal perspective, and I'm not just talking about my own person, but in the individual, is either living in the past or living in the future. Being completely present with what is in reality and in relationship with it is really the key to collapsing time-space.
That sounds absolutely true.
Well, that comes from somebody who practices this all day long. So
right.
We have to consider the source here. I think that's probably a good place to leave the interview right there, just in the unknown. I want to give people the opportunity to get in touch with you if they want to learn to become healers themselves or if they want to partake of the healing services that you offer. How do people get in touch with you if they want to learn more?
Well, the easiest way would be to visit our website. So that's very easy. It's www.barbarabrennan.com. And that would be the easiest way. And there's contact information on there. And you could just certainly feel free to reach out.
Terrific. And on the website, do you have a list of healers who offer their services?
There is a list of healers.
Okay.
Yeah, by area that people can search on. Absolutely.
Terrific. Anything else you want to add to this conversation?
No, it's been very pleasurable. Thank you very much. Great questions and very thought-provoking.
Well, thank you. I tend to think I'm a crazy person who thinks about a lot of crazy things. So I'm glad that I could ask good questions of you, and I'm glad you had a good time. I can't thank you enough for your time. You gave a wonderful interview, and I really appreciate you taking the time to do it.
Absolutely.
Enjoy your day.
Thank you so much.
The pleasure was mine.
Be certain to tune in again to Expanding on Consciousness to become informed on the fascinating field of consciousness studies and its applications. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the guests and the host. They do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the Monroe Institute. Expanding on Consciousness is underwritten and produced by the Monroe Institute, copyright 2022, and is broadcast by permission. Reproduction or redistribution without the express written consent of Monroe Institute is prohibited by law. For more information about Expanding on Consciousness, visit our website at monroeinstitute.org or connect with us on the socials. Thank you for listening.